Afia was the kind of girl whose presence could silence the wind and draw the gaze of spirits. Her skin glowed like burnished bronze under the West African sun, and her laughter danced like ripples on a quiet river. In the village of Olode, nestled between thick forests and ochre hills, she was known as the Daughter of the Moon, a name gifted to her by the elders when she was born under a lunar eclipse. But it wasn't just her beauty that set her apart. Afia had a strange, piercing gaze that made people shift uncomfortably when she looked too long into their eyes. Children said she could see right through you. Adults called her gifted, but only when she could hear. When she couldn't, they whispered something else, Dibia, witch. Yet no one could deny the truth. Afia had a way of looking into your soul. She would lock eyes with a grieving woman and tell her what she'd lost. She would glance at a man and know his guilt without a word. Some people came to her for comfort, others for truth. But many avoided her altogether, scared of what she might see. Her mother, Amma, was a quiet woman with a tired smile. Life had not been kind to her, widowed young, left to raise a daughter who was both a marvel and a burden. When Amma married again, the village buzzed with speculation. The man was a hunter named Akong, recently arrived from a distant region after the death of his own wife. He was tall, scarred, and spoke little. His eyes were always shadowed, even in daylight, as though they carried a storm that refused to clear. At first, Akong tolerated Afia's presence with cold civility. He watched her closely, like a predator uncertain whether the creature before him was prey or poison. Afia, always respectful, avoided his gaze, sensing the heaviness in him. But over time, Akong's patience thinned. The villagers greeted Afia with warmth and brought her small gifts, palm wine, groundnuts, beads, while they barely nodded at him. Children still followed Afia, asking her what she saw in the clouds, or whether the spirits were angry today. And though she never claimed to be a seer, her answers always seemed right. Akong began to mutter under his breath when Afia entered a room. He sharpened his knives longer than necessary and drank his palm wine with more ferocity than thirst. He accused her of looking into his mind, of planting thoughts there. One night, he grabbed her arm, his grip like iron, and hissed, "Don't you ever look into my eyes. Do you hear me, girl? You look, and you die." Afia nodded, her voice quiet. "I didn't mean to. I never will." She tried to keep her head bowed whenever he passed. She avoided him at the dinner mat, stayed in her hut during his return from the forest. But fear was like smoke, it crept in no matter how tightly the door was shut. Then came the afternoon that would change everything. Amma had gone to fetch cassava from the stream, leaving Afia to sort palm kernels outside. The sky was heavy, gray with coming rain, and the wind carried the scent of old leaves and far-off thunder. Afia bent over her task, unaware that Akong had returned early from his hunt. She reached for a kernel that rolled too far, and as she straightened up, her gaze accidentally met his. It was only for a heartbeat. A single, electric moment. But it was enough. She saw it. Not a soul, but a thing. Coiled and twitching in the black of his pupils, a slithering shadow with too many limbs and a mouth that opened in silent, eternal screams. Its form was not of this world. It lived in the hollow of his being, feeding off something darker than rage. In that instant, the air froze around her, and she felt the sharp bite of its hatred, not just from Akong, but from what lived inside him. She gasped and stumbled back, dropping the kernels. Akong froze, as if struck by lightning. Then he smiled, a slow, crooked thing that did not reach his eyes. He said nothing. Just turned and walked inside. That night, the air in their home was thick like clotting blood. Akong didn't eat. He sat by the fire sharpening his machete with a stone that screamed under the pressure. Afia sat in the corner, blindfolded by her own hands, heart pounding. Her mother returned and felt the tension, but said nothing. She had learned long ago the danger of asking questions in a room full of secrets. As the wind howled through the trees and the fire hissed in the hearth, Akong muttered to himself in a voice not fully his own. Words in a language Afia didn't recognize. His breathing was uneven, his eyes wide and unblinking. And every so often, he would glance in her direction, not like a stepfather watching a child, but like a hunter watching prey he hadn't yet decided to kill. Afia didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. Not after what she had seen. Because the worst part wasn't the creature hiding in Akon's soul. The worst part was the feeling that the creature had seen her too, and smiled. And somewhere deep within her, something ancient and cold stirred in response. The days following Afia's accidental glimpse into Akon's soul were filled with a silence so thick it swallowed sound. The hut felt colder, smaller, as if the walls themselves had begun to cower. Akon no longer pretended to tolerate her. He watched her openly now, unblinking, as though waiting for something, or deciding when to strike. Afia could feel the shift in the air. Her dreams became darker, filled with whispers in tongues she didn't know. And when she awoke, she often felt a strange pressure behind her eyes, like something inside her was trying to push its way out. Still, she kept her silence. Until the night she broke. She waited until her mother returned from gathering wood. Amma had lines in her face that hadn't been there weeks ago. Her shoulders were hunched from the weight of too many unspoken things. Afia took her hand and pulled her behind the hut, far from Akon's ears. The moon was only a sliver, and the wind rattled the trees with the sounds of dry bones. "I saw it, Mama," Afia whispered. "I saw something inside him." Amma froze. "Inside who?" "Akon. That day. I looked into his eyes. I didn't mean to, but I saw it. Something evil lives in him. It's not human." Amma's face tightened. "You must never say that again. Do you hear me, Afia? It's the truth. Truth or not, it will get you killed. He's your stepfather. You will respect him." Afia felt her throat close. "You believe him over me?" "I believe in survival," Amma snapped. Her voice cracked, and she turned away. "Please, don't make him angry again." But it was too late. Akon had already changed. That night, when he stumbled and drunk from the palm wine tapper's hut, he didn't curse under his breath or ignore them like usual. He stood in the doorway for a long time, swaying slightly, staring at Afia with a look that chilled her bones. "You saw too much," he mumbled, the slur in his voice hiding something sharp. "You brought it out." No one spoke. Amma looked at her daughter, then at Akon, and said nothing. Fear had already taken root in her spine. The next day, Afia found the door bolted from the outside. Her mother was gone, likely sent on some errand by Akon, and the man himself hadn't returned. But Afia knew this was no mistake. She was being caged. She paced the room, her breath growing shallow. Every sound outside made her flinch, the rustle of leaves, the bark of a dog, the whisper of wind through the thatch roof. The house felt different now. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a trap. Night fell like a curse. Afia sat curled against the wall, heart pounding. Then she heard it, the heavy, deliberate creak of the door. Akon had returned. His footsteps dragged across the floorboards, slow, measured. Afia didn't move. She held her breath. The scent of palm wine hit her before she saw him, a thick, sour stench that clung to his skin. But beneath it was something worse. Burning. Smoke. He said nothing. Just moved past her, into the tiny kitchen. She heard him pull something from the shelf. Then the metallic clang of a pot. Then silence. Then the fire. The sound of flames licking the bottom of a pot was familiar. Afia had cooked with her mother since she could hold a spoon. But this wasn't the same. The silence in the room made it wrong. The way the pot was left on the fire too long made it worse. The oil hissed. Then it bubbled. Then it spat. She stood up slowly, fear clawing at her throat. "Baba Akon," she called out. No answer. He appeared from the kitchen like a shadow sliding across the floor, the pot in his hands. The glow from the fire reflected in his eyes, eyes no longer fully human. They shone with something greedy, something ancient. "You see too much," he whispered. "Now, you'll see nothing." Afia tried to run. She screamed. But he was faster. He threw her to the ground, pinning her with the weight of a man twice her size. His breath reeked. His hands were strong and merciless. "No," she cried. "Please. Don't." The last thing she saw was the glint of the pot, red-hot and dripping. Then came the pain. The oil seared into her eyes like fire sent from the gods. It tore through her vision, through her mind, through her soul. Her screams shattered the silence of the village. They pierced through huts and hearts. But no one came. Her mother, only a short walk away, froze when she heard the first scream. She dropped the basket she was carrying. The ground beneath her seemed to sway. But her feet would not move. She knew that scream. She knew what it meant. But fear rooted her to the earth. By the time she returned, it was done. Afia lay curled on the floor, eyes white and blistered, the skin of her face slick and torn. She no longer screamed. She no longer moved. Only the sound of her breath, shallow, ragged, remained. Akon was gone. The pot still smoked in the corner. Amma fell to her knees beside her daughter, but Afia didn't speak. She had descended into a place beyond pain. A place darker than the night. The village gathered the next morning. Akon claimed it had been an accident. A spilled pot. A mistake. He wept false tears and raised his hands to the sky. The elders shook their heads. Some believed him. Others did not. But no one challenged him. He was a hunter. A man. And Afia was just a girl. They mourned quietly. They brought offerings. But no one asked Afia what happened. She could not see. And they assumed she would not speak. But Afia knew the truth. And in the blackness where her sight had once lived, something else opened its eyes. It was not human. It had always been there, watching from the edge of her soul, waiting for the moment her pain would break the final seal. Now, blind and burned, she could see again, only not with human eyes. And what she saw in that darkness was not meant for any living being. Afia lived in a world without light, yet she was no longer lost in darkness. In the weeks after the attack, her body healed slowly, but something else had awakened, something she could not explain, nor silence. When she closed her useless eyes at night, the blackness filled with strange visions. They were not dreams. She did not imagine them. They were real. She saw things as if through smoke and mist, not with sight, but with something deeper. The first time it happened, she saw a woman burying something behind a tree in the dead of night. Afia didn't recognize her at first, but the next morning, when the woman passed by her hut pretending to greet her sweetly, Afia knew. The woman had buried her neighbor's stolen necklace. At first, Afia thought she was going mad. She didn't speak of the visions. But then more began to come. She saw her neighbor's goat being dragged into the forest by a man who had claimed wild dogs took it. She saw a young wife kissing her brother-in-law in secret by the riverbank. She saw a baby who had stopped crying because something cold and dead was sitting on his chest, a spirit no one else could see. And soon, others began to notice. The animals came first. Cats sat outside her hut at dusk, staring in with yellow eyes. Birds perched on her window ledge, silent, watching. A small deer came once, even licked her hand before vanishing back into the woods. The villagers said she smelled like earth and secrets. Then the whispers started. They said she could speak with the dead. That she knew things no one told her. That her blindness was a curse, but also a gift. A punishment turned into a power. The first to visit her were children. Curious, brave little ones who sat just outside her door and asked questions. "Where's my lost doll?" one asked. Afia closed her eyes and saw it, under a pile of ashes behind the cooking hut. The girl found it exactly there. Then the old came, those who had lost things long ago. One elder woman came, face covered in tears. "My son died 2 seasons ago. I never found his body. Can you see him?" Afia held the woman's hands. The air grew cold. In her mind, a vision unfolded, bones buried beneath a fig tree on the edge of the sacred hill. She described the place. The villagers dug, and there he was. People stopped calling her the blind girl. They began to call her the woman who sees without eyes. They brought gifts to her door. Yams, smoked fish, cola nuts, cloth. Some out of gratitude. Others out of fear. She never asked for anything. Yet they gave. One night, as the wind howled through the village, Afia sat alone, her ears tuned to a sound not carried by wind. Voices. But not human. They spoke in riddles. In names. In laughter and sobs. She heard them say. The hunter burns but cannot hide. His blood is ink. His soul is split. She knew they were talking about Akong. He hadn't spoken to her since the night he blinded her. He stayed away, drinking more heavily now, walking the village with twitching eyes and muttering under his breath. He knew what the people said about her. And he feared her in a way he never had before. At night, he heard the villagers whispering outside the palm wine shed. She told old Kofi who stole his yam harvest. She found the dead baby buried near the river. She knows. And once, he heard someone say, she must know what he did to her. Akong's hands trembled around his gourd. His nightmares had grown worse. He dreamed of Afia with no eyes, standing above him, her face lit with fire, her voice speaking things no man should hear. One night, he stood outside her hut in the dark, watching the glow of her small fire through the cracks in the walls. He thought of going inside, of finishing what he started. But the animals were there, a dozen cats, a silent owl, even a dog with milky eyes that did not move. They stared at him. Daring him. And Afia, she turned her head. Slowly. Directly toward him. Though blind, she faced him without fear. Go away, Akong, she said quietly. The spirits are not patient tonight. He stumbled back, heart pounding. She had seen him. Inside the hut, Afia remained still. Her face expressionless. But her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, from power. Something inside her had grown stronger. The veil between her world and others was thin now. She could see the sins of every person who crossed her path. Their regrets, their buried memories, their lies. And beyond that, she began to see shadows that didn't belong to this world at all. They watched her. Whispered to her. Some wanted to help. Some wanted to feed. Afia didn't fully understand what she had become. Only that she was no longer just a girl. Not even just a victim. She was a vessel. A mirror for the unseen. And the man who broke her, her stepfather, was starting to unravel under the weight of what she now carried. The village did not speak of Akong's crime, but everyone knew. And Afia never spoke of it, but she remembered every scream. Now, she did not need revenge. She had something far more terrifying. She had the truth. Afia sat cross-legged beneath the moon, her blind eyes lifted toward the stars she could no longer see but somehow felt humming above her. The night air was heavy with whispers, voices rustling in the leaves, murmurs in the grass, names on the wind. Her world had changed again. It was not enough that she could see sins and secrets. Now, she was beginning to understand why. It had started with fragments, flashes of a name, a shape that wasn't human, a dark ripple coiled inside Akong the day she looked into his eyes. She remembered the way it twisted when she saw it. The way it flinched from her gaze. That wasn't Akong's rage. That was something older, darker. One night, she sat in silence, and the voices began to chant together, a single word, Botu. The name rang through her body like a drumbeat. Memories rushed back to her, not hers but belonging to another voice, her grandmother's, who had once sung songs while pounding yam, her melodies thick with wisdom. Afia remembered a line she had never understood as a child. Beware the man whose shadow dances without him, for in his eyes lives the Mbotu. She remembered another. When the innocent are blinded in fire, the veil is pierced. They become night gazers. eyes for the ancestors. Night gazer. That was what she had become. The next morning, a stranger came to her hut. An old man wrapped in layered fabrics, his body painted with white ash, a charm-filled belt jangling with bones and shells. He introduced himself as Oguno, a shaman from the mountains beyond the river. He had heard whispers of a girl who saw without seeing. He knelt beside her and placed his palm on her forehead. "You have walked into the river of shadows, child," he said in a grave voice. "And now the river walks with you." Afia told him everything, the visions, the whispers, the animals, the spirit that writhed in Akon's soul. When she said the name Botu, Oguno's breath caught. "You know the name," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "The Mbotu are not demons in the way children fear them. They are spirits of suffering, birthed by centuries of blood and betrayal. They find broken souls, feed on them, and wear them like skins. Few can see them. Fewer survive when they do." Afia felt the truth burn through her chest. "Akon is not just evil, he's infected." "Yes," Oguno said. "And he is no longer alone inside himself. The longer it feeds, the stronger it becomes. It chose him because he was already cracked. Already violent. But now it is planning more, it is not satisfied with just you." Afia's fists tightened. She thought of the way Akon walked lately, more like a creature than a man. Of the way even the trees leaned away when he passed. "He wants to hurt others," she said. "Yes," Oguno replied. "And if the Mbota breaks fully through, it can spread, from one host to another. Pain is its currency. Terror is its feast." Afia's voice was cold and steady. "Then I have to stop it." The shaman nodded, solemn. "You must train. You must become more than a seer. You must become a weapon." And so, Afia began her initiation. By day, she listened to the stories of the old ones, whispered legends of the night gazers who came before her. Women who were burned, mutilated, blinded, and in their agony, saw the truth behind the skin of the world. By night, she meditated under the moon, not in sleep but in surrender. She lay on the bare earth, arms open, letting the soil speak to her. She fasted. She chanted. She learned to call the wind, to calm the angry spirits of the forest, to read the vibration of a footstep, the taste of a lie. And always, she saw more. She saw the Mbota crawling deeper into Akon's body. His skin turning darker, not with color but with energy. His eyes flickering when no one was watching. His reflection no longer matching his face. She saw that he had begun digging behind their hut, a hole, a place he murmured to at night. But worst of all, she saw children in his visions. The Mbota wanted them. It wanted the innocent. One night, the spirits came to her in a storm. They did not speak in words. They moved through her, pain, fury, sorrow, wisdom, and she understood. The Mbota had tasted her suffering and awakened her sight. But now, her sight was a threat. It had seen its own face through her. And now it wanted to destroy her completely. She could no longer be passive. Oguno brought her a mask made of wood and bone. "The night gazers wore these to walk between worlds," he explained. "When you wear this, you are not Afia. You are something older." She took it in both hands and held it to her face. The spirits roared with approval. Now, she saw deeper. Beneath skin. Beneath soul. She began to see threads, connections between people, places, moments. She saw how one lie 10 years ago birthed the hatred that allowed the Mbota to enter Akon. She saw how her own mother's silence had fed it. She saw the wound in the village that no one wanted to name. The Mbota was not just in Akon. It was in the shame, the silence, the fear. It had waited generations. And now it wanted to become flesh. Afia stood beneath the moonlight, her blind eyes glowing faintly. The mask sat in her lap. Her fingers brushed the carvings, each one etched with a story of pain and justice. She was no longer just a victim. She was no longer even a girl. She was a night gazer. and the monster wearing her stepfather's skin had begun to tremble in its stolen bones. The air in the village had shifted. Afia felt it long before the others did, the way the breeze moved like it was warning her, the way the birds grew silent at dusk. But when she stepped into the village square, her blind eyes covered in a white cloth, her voice calm but firm, no one was ready to listen. She stood in front of the shrine, surrounded by curious faces, neighbors, elders, and gossips. They had once come to her for answers, praised her as a seer, whispered about her gifts in awe. But now, as she spoke of a darkness growing in a cone, their faces turned uneasy. "He is not what you think he is," she said softly. "The man who walks among you wears the skin of a cone, but inside, he is something else. Something ancient. Something that feeds on pain." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone chuckled nervously. An elder cleared his throat. "You mean your stepfather, Afia?" asked Mama Kobo, an old woman with cloudy eyes. "Yes, he is cruel. But not a demon." Another villager piped in, "She's been blind for too long. Maybe she's dreaming things. She's just trying to scare us. She's lost her mind." Afia stood her ground, her voice unwavering. "You've forgotten your own stories. The Mbotu is real. It lives in shadows. It drinks fear. It is inside him. And it is growing." A silence followed, thick and awkward. Then someone laughed, a forced, uneasy laugh that others joined in to break the tension. They didn't believe her. They couldn't. And that very night, the forest took its first offering. A young girl named Ceci did not come home after sunset. Her mother screamed through the village, lantern in hand, waking everyone. Men gathered with torches, fanning out into the woods. Afia stayed in her hut, seated with her hands pressed to the floor, eyes closed. She felt the moment it happened. Not death, not yet, but a tearing. A soul being pierced by something hungry. She didn't sleep. The next morning, they found Ceci's headscarf snagged in a tree. No sign of her. 2 nights later, it happened again. A boy named Olam went missing while fetching firewood. His shoes were found near the river, but no tracks. No blood. Only silence. Then came the animals. Goats mutilated and hung upside down from trees. Chickens with their eyes plucked out. A dog with its tongue ripped out, still warm when it was discovered. And then the dreams began. Children waking up screaming. Crying. Clawing at their faces. They all described the same thing, a tall man, too tall, whose eyes were hollow and black, whose breath made their skin blister, whose voice whispered promises in languages they did not understand. He stood beside their beds. He pressed cold fingers to their heads. And then vanished. Still, the villagers hesitated to believe. Coincidence, some said. Maybe leopards, others offered weakly. A spirit in the forest, whispered a few, glancing nervously toward Afia's hut. But Afia knew. The Mbotu was feeding. Not on flesh, not yet, but on dread. The kind of dread that lingered after nightmares. The kind that made people check their locks twice. The kind that turned families against each other. It was preparing to be born fully. One morning, Afia stood by the edge of the well, her face tilted to the sky. The birds were still missing. Even the flies buzzed slower. She spoke aloud, though no one stood near her. "It is harvesting," she said. "And no one will be spared." Later that evening, as the sky bled into orange, she whispered into a gourd filled with river water and crushed herbs. Her fingers danced over the surface, invoking the spirits of the air. Her voice was low, rhythmic, ancient, not her own. "Oguno," she whispered into the gourd. "The time is now. I need you." Far beyond the river, where the trees grow fat and old, Oguno felt the call in his bones. He gathered his charms and bones, his sacred firestones and his grandmother's staff. He knew the time had come, the demon was blooming. Back in the village, Afia lay in her hut, her heart heavy. She could feel the soil breathing fast, the trees leaning closer. Even the insects had begun to speak to her in urgent clicks. Akong had changed completely. He didn't bother hiding it anymore. He walked like a man carrying something too big inside him. His face twitched strangely, like it wasn't made to hold that much rage. His voice had become too low, too slow. His eyes reflected no light. She heard him speaking to something in the dark behind the hut. Not words. Growls. She heard him digging again. The dreams came to her now too. But not as victims. As warnings. In one, she saw the village burning, children running with bleeding eyes, and Akong laughing, tall and thin, his skin cracking like bark, smoke leaking from his mouth. She woke with her fists clenched and her breath icy. The villagers still didn't come to her. But the children began to gather near her hut at dusk, silently, just to sit. To feel safe. Their parents watched from afar, saying nothing. The spirits whispered to her, soon. Soon he will tear the veil. Soon the village will know. But Afia didn't want them to learn through blood. She sat up that night and prepared her offering. A goat. White cloth. Ash. Her mother watched her from the doorway, unsure whether to help or flee. For the first time in weeks, Afia spoke to her. He will take more, Afia said. And it will not stop. Her mother said nothing. Her eyes welled with tears, but her mouth stayed closed, as it had always been. Afia turned away. When the wind shifted, she knew the shaman was coming. She could smell the mountain herbs. She could hear the rhythm of his staff echoing in the roots of the ground. And still, Akong dug. And still, the village slept, hoping the darkness would forget them. But Afia knew the truth. It never forgets. It waits. And it is always hungry. The forest was unnaturally silent as Afia and Oguno, the old shaman, stepped through the thickets toward the clearing where the moon tree stood. The sky above them was choked in gray, yet the full moon glowed unnaturally bright, framed in a halo that shimmered like bone. Afia, though blind, saw it in her mind, not as light, but as a living eye, watching. The moon tree was ancient. Its bark was silver white, its roots twisting like serpents through the soil. Legend said its seed had fallen from the sky, and that beneath its roots slept the boundary between the living and the dead. Oguno laid out the ritual tools carefully on a flat stone altar. Bones etched with ancestral names. A gourd of sacred river water. A mirror wrapped in snakeskin. And herbs that reeked of fire and time, some known only to those who spoke to the dead. Afia knelt opposite him, her hands trembling slightly as she touched each item, letting her fingers memorize them. The mirror shows the soul, Oguno said quietly. Not the face. When he sees it, the Mbodu will try to hide, but it cannot lie to itself. Afia nodded. And if it tries to run? Then we trap it. With blood and name. Afia closed her eyes, already cloaked in darkness. But the darkness inside her was no longer empty. It moved. It whispered. It waited. The spirits gathered. She could feel them, ancestors without names, watching from beyond the veil. They murmured warnings into the wind. If you fail, he will take your mind. You will scream forever in a place without light. But she did not waver. They began the chant. Low at first. A hum that came from the earth itself. Oguno's voice was gravel, old and rhythmic. Afia joined in, her voice soft, steady. Their tones spiraled, wove into each other, and the wind began to rise. The moon tree groaned. The mirror pulsed in her lap. Then the ground beneath them throbbed once, like a giant heart had beaten under the soil. He was coming. They could hear footsteps now, slow and cracking. Akong, or what wore his skin, emerged from the shadows. He no longer walked like a man. His spine arched wrong. His legs bent too far. His arms were too long, his hands too stiff. His face, it was Akong's and yet it wasn't. His eyes were not eyes. They were pits. Holes that sucked in light. The Mboda had taken over fully. He spoke, and the words fell out like oil. "You shouldn't have called me here." Afia stood, holding the mirror. "I didn't call you," she said. "I dragged you." The wind shrieked. The moon tree's branches shivered violently. Akon lunged. Oguno stepped between them, flinging powder into the air. It exploded into green fire. The Mbota howled. Its skin blistered. But it kept coming. Oguno began the counterchant. Afia stepped sideways, circling the altar, mirror in hand. The demon's head jerked toward her, sensing something. "Afia," Oguno called, "show it the truth." She raised the mirror, not to see, but to be seen. The mirror shone briefly, then turned black. A reflection appeared, not of Akon's body, but of a creature made of screaming mouths and twisting limbs, chained in shadow. The Mbota hissed, recoiling. Oguno began to press forward, staff raised. "You are named, Spirit. You are seen." The earth split beneath Akon's feet. Black liquid oozed out. The roots of the moon tree squirmed like worms in light. The Mbota roared, and suddenly Oguno flew backwards, hitting the tree with a sickening crack. He didn't move. Afia stood alone now, the mirror shaking in her hands. The Mbota turned its hollow face to her. "You are blind," it growled. "You cannot see me." "But you can see me," Afia whispered. She tore the cloth from her face. 2 sockets. Red. Scarred. Empty. Yet the wind stopped. Even the spirits went silent. Because what stared from those hollow places was not human. Afia's soul had become something else. She had not just gained sight, she had been changed. Molded by pain. Fed by ancient truths. The Mbota leaned closer, drawn, curious. And then, it flinched. Inside Afia, it saw something deeper. Older than itself. A darkness that did not scream. A silence that devoured. It tried to back away. But she reached out and grabbed its face. "I saw into your soul once," she said, her voice not hers anymore. "Now see into mine." And she poured everything into him, every scream, every scar, every vision, every secret the spirits had fed her. The pain. The love. The betrayal. The rage. She became a mirror of its own hunger, but purer. Sharper. Unforgiving. The Mbota shrieked. Its body twisted violently. Akon's limbs snapped. The air split with sound. The moon tree howled. The earth tore open under the demon, and roots wrapped around its legs like snakes. It tried to escape, but Afia held fast. "You blinded me," she whispered to Akon, or what was left of him. "But I see everything now. Even what lies beyond the end." The mirror burst. So did Akon's body. There was no blood. Only dust. The wind stopped. The moon tree stood still. Afia collapsed. And the forest exhaled. Above, the moon dimmed, as if it had seen enough. Afia stood trembling in the eerie silence left by the shattered mirror and the fading echoes of the Mbotu's terrible howl. Her heart pounded wildly, though no blood ran through her veins now, only ancient power. The shadows surrounding the moon tree thickened, folding around her like heavy curtains drawn tight across the veil between worlds. Though blind, her mind's eye opened wider than ever. A terrifying vision clawed its way into her consciousness, a swirling maelstrom of shapes and colors no human should ever glimpse. The Mbotu's true form revealed itself, a monstrous creature far beyond the twisted figure Akon had worn like a mask. It was an ancient being, older than the forest, older than the stars themselves, imprisoned in the narrow space between life and death. Its body was a mass of writhing eyes, each bleeding darkness and light at once, shifting and multiplying endlessly, peering into all dimensions simultaneously. Afia's face burned as if her skin had melted into molten fire. From her empty eye sockets, streams of tears poured down, not water, but flames that danced and hissed upon touching her cheeks. The pain was unbearable, but she refused to look away. This vision was a curse and a blessing, a torment and a revelation. Through the fire, she saw the sins Thembotu had fed on, the anger, the envy, the secrets buried deep beneath the village's calm surface. She saw not just Akon's corruption and rage, but the long history of cruelty and neglect the village carried in its bones. The forgotten betrayals of ancestors, the silent suffering of widows and orphans, the unspoken shame that poisoned families from within. Thembotu was no random fiend, it was summoned by the rot festering in human hearts, invited by the shadows men dared not confront. Afia trembled, realizing the true weight of her gift and her curse. Thembotu was a mirror, reflecting the darkness mankind had hidden for generations. To destroy it was to expose those wounds, and to heal would require more than one ritual beneath an ancient tree. Then, amidst the chaos of her vision, a word came to her, old, unuttered for centuries, hidden in the deepest roots of the spirit tongue. She whispered it into the still night air. The sound was jagged and raw, like the cracking of ancient bones. The word tore through the fabric of the world, slicing the air and stirring the leaves into a frenzy. Thembotu shrieked, a sound that shattered stone and splintered time. Its many eyes blinked in agony, fracturing like shards of glass. The creature writhed as invisible chains wrapped around it, pulling it downward through the earth and into the abyss from which it had emerged. The void yawned open, swallowing the monster whole, leaving only a faint echo of its terrible hunger behind. Akon collapsed on the cold ground, his body convulsing as the last vestiges of the parasite clawed their way out of his flesh and soul. He screamed, a primal, guttural cry filled with pain, rage, and the shame of 1,000 sins bared at once. The villagers, long unaware of the darkness creeping among them, would never understand what had passed that night. Afia knelt beside him, her fiery tears falling silently. She knew the parasite was gone, but its curse lingered like a poison in the blood. Akon's broken soul was a fragile thing now, torn between redemption and oblivion. And beyond him, the village still slept, blind to the evil that had crept through their lives for generations. The vision faded, but the weight of its truth stayed with Afia, the terrible knowledge that some darkness cannot be burned away with fire, nor banished with chance. It lived in the hearts of men, and as long as that darkness remained, creatures like Thembotu would always find a way back. Her sight beyond sight had shown her not only the horrors of a single man but the buried wounds of an entire people. Afia understood that her journey was only beginning. The battle to heal the village, to bring the hidden sins into the light, was the true fight ahead. She rose slowly, the flames in her eyes dimming to a quiet ember. The night whispered around her, a fragile promise on the wind. The village must learn to see, truly see, before it was too late. Afia watched Akon with a quiet sorrow as he muttered incoherent words, his once menacing presence reduced to a pitiful figure, mad, blind, and broken. The villagers, once terrified of his rage and the evil that consumed him, now turned away, unwilling to care for the monster he had become. He was left to wander the fringes of the village, a shadow of the man who had tried to destroy her. Meanwhile, Afia's story spread like wildfire across the land. The girl who had been blinded by hot oil yet had gained the power to see what no human should became a living legend. Whispers filled the marketplace and the firesides, some spoke of her with reverence, others with fear. But all agreed on one thing, Afia was no ordinary woman. She had become something more, a bridge between the world of the living and the restless spirits beyond. Children, curious and respectful, began to leave small offerings at her humble hut, beads, herbs, and carved figures, tokens to honor her connection with the unseen. The spirits, it was said, gathered around her like a protective cloak, shielding her from harm and guiding her footsteps in the darkest of nights. Though Afia never regained her physical sight, the blindness that once seemed like a cruel punishment became a source of immense strength. Her second sight grew sharper with each passing day. She could see beyond flesh and bone, into the secrets hidden beneath the surface of the earth and the hearts of men. Lost souls found their way to her, seeking peace, wrongs long buried were unearthed by her silent gaze, the wicked trembled when her presence hovered nearby, for she became judge and avenger in one. Some whispered that Afia saw even more, the exact day of a person's death, the paths their souls would take, and the terrifying realms that lay beyond the grave. People crossed themselves when her name was spoken, for she was a keeper of mysteries no one dared to face. Afia herself smiled softly when she heard the murmurs that danced on the wind. He took her eyes. Now she sees what no human should. Her smile held no bitterness, only the quiet acceptance of a destiny she could not escape. She had been broken, burned, and left for dead, but in that darkness, she had been reborn. One misty morning, as the village still slept beneath a heavy fog, Afia stepped barefoot into the swirling gray. Her empty eye sockets glowed faintly, a ghostly light that pierced the gloom. Shadows gathered behind her, silent and watchful, following wherever she chose to walk. She vanished into the mist, a figure both haunting and beautiful, carrying the secrets of the dead and the living alike. And in that moment, the village understood the truth of her power. Afia was no longer just a girl, she was the guardian of the unseen, the girl with the eyes of the dead.